So we've got Agent 3. And Agent 3 is basically as smart as a person, just a little bit less, but on the road to AGI, as they say. Let's go to August 2027. The geopolitics of superintelligence is written here. The reality of the intelligence explosion hits the White House. When AI was only giving a 2 times or 3 times, I don't know why people in tech like to say 2x and 3x. When I grew up, it was 2 times or 3 times, because the X means times rather than X. Anyway, when AI was only giving a 2x or 3x research speed up, it was easy to dismiss the equivalent of hiring good personal assistants. Now it's more obvious that AIs are themselves dominating AI research. People have long talked about an AI arms race in a sort of metaphorical sense, but now the mood in the government silo is as grim as during the worst part of the Cold War. The idea of superintelligence is still hard to take seriously, but the pace of progress over the last few months has been impossible to ignore. Defence officials are seriously considering scenarios that were mere hypotheticals a year earlier. What if AI undermines nuclear deterrence? What if it's so skilled at cyber warfare that a 6-month AI lead is enough to render an opponent blind and defenceless? End quote. So here we have, the apocalyptic scenarios are rehashed over and over again over decades. I think can't have been the first, but the first one that I was aware of was 1989, 90, possibly. The first Terminator movie. That's 35 years ago now. 35 years ago now. Exactly the same argument was being made. So there's nothing new here. The AI is going to get a hold of the American defense, possibly, and take charge of the nuclear weapons and perhaps launch a strike against Russia or the Soviet Union, as it was back then, knowing full well that there would be a counter-strike and then all humanity would be wiped out. And that's how the AI gets a hold. The Matrix makes exactly the same point. I think there was an 80s movie called War Games where it was a similar thing as well. In all these cases, AI, the risk is, and everyone's worried about the risk of AI getting hold of defense and the nuclear weapons. Now, I think that the real concern is that a mistake would be made, that the human is taken out of the loop, and that you have the AI in charge of all the nuclear weapons across the USA, and it wrongly thinks that a launch has been made. I guess a human can do this as well, and there are scenarios you can look up historically of where the Russians thought the Americans had launched at them and they were getting ready to launch back, and this kind of thing happens. Crimson Tide's a good movie when it comes to that particular thing. I think it's called that, where the captain of a nuclear sub thinks that the Russians have launched nuclear weapons and he wants to launch nuclear weapons. And the first officer, played by Denzel Washington, says, no, you're not going to launch nuclear weapons, and there's a mutiny on board, and so on and so forth. Well, very exciting. It's exciting when you think that the nuclear weapons are coming. And so throw AI together with nuclear weapons, and you have the classic blockbuster movie, blockbuster article here that invokes those things. So I'm not going to read that. I'm going to go past this. September 2027, Agent 4 has been produced, the superhuman AI researcher. At this point, we've got the AI is now, according to our graphs here, superhuman, very superhuman with respect to hacking, coding, politics, making bioweapons, robotics. It's pretty good at, and forecasting the future, because it can forecast the future. Just as humans can forecast the future, the AI can forecast the future, because after all, the future is predictable. We know what the future of knowledge creation is going to be. We know the problems that we're going to encounter, and we know what solutions are going to be generated in the future on this ridiculous epistemology that underpins the entirety of this article. It's why philosophy is important. It's why philosophy is important, to understand when you're thinking in a Bayesian inductive way, when you think that that is a reasonable way in order to generate explanations, or you think that people are predictable and you think the future is predictable and all this sort of stuff, and you're siloed in a world of forecasting. You call it forecasting because that sounds much more scientifically, technological and mathematically precise than clairvoyance does. Okay? Clairvoyance evokes a kind of mystical kind of thing, but in both cases you're prophesying the future, you're guessing at the future. You're pretending to possess knowledge you do not have. You just don't know. You don't know. Anyone can guess at the future. Now you might say some people are more informed about their guesses of the future than others. There are certain predictions that of course we can make, The doctor can predict that if you take this particular medication, it will fix the ailment you have. Okay, I can predict that if you take the antibiotic, it will get rid of your meningococcal meningitis. Okay, that's a scientific prediction. There are all sorts of scientific predictions that are legitimate to make. Mixing the acid and the base produces salt and water. There's a prediction from good chemistry. But guessing at any arena where human choice is involved is a fool's errand, because you don't know what choices people will make in the future. You don't know what problems they'll encounter, what natural disasters might have happened, what viruses might have escaped, what new technologies might have been created and how they will respond to it, what political eruptions are going on, what kind of movements might have just been invented, what kind of entertainment might have been created that is going to change the zeitgeist and all this kind of stuff. Fashion, technology, just the general way in which people are unpredictable year after year after year. If people were predictable, people would make a lot more money on the stock market than what they do reliably. Some people make a lot of money on the stock market, but there's always this thing of, are they just lucky and investing in the right companies, or do they know something that most of us don't? Now, I think there's two sorts of people. There are those who genuinely have knowledge and who are better than the rest of us when it comes to trading, investing, stock market, and that kind of thing. But there are also some people that are simply lucky. There are some people who are simply lucky. But, that's another story. That's a whole other thing. When it comes to forecasting, I think it is all luck. It is all luck. You throw 100 forecasters at the issue of what's going to happen over the next 10 years, get them to make 50 predictions each. You've got 5,000 predictions there. Some number of them are going to be precise and right on target. And you could then rank order your forecasters and say the person at the top is a brilliant forecaster. But it was just luck. They were no more informed about the future. They no more knew the future or had any deep insight into the future than the person who was last on that list. Because if they did, they wouldn't just make the predictions, they would tell you why. And they would use it in order to invest and make money. What we've got here is the claim that the gap between human and AI learning efficiency is rapidly decreasing. Traditional LLM-based AIs seem to require many orders of magnitude more data and compute to get to human-level performance. Agent 3, having excellent knowledge of both the human brain and modern AI algorithms, as well as many thousands of copies doing research, ends up making substantial algorithmic strides, narrowing the gap to an agent that's only around 4,000 times less compute efficient than the human brain. The new AI system is dubbed Agent 4. So at least they admit here that the human brain is highly compute efficient. That's good. Knowledge of the human brain. Wonder what that means. Does it understand how the creative algorithm, so-called algorithm, the creative mind works? Or does it just mean that they've scanned the brain and they know down to the cellular level what the components of the brain are and they've been able to map the brain? Knowledge of the brain. I don't know what that means. They go on to say, so this is Agent 4, an individual copy of the model running at human speed is already qualitatively better at AI research than any human. 300,000 copies are running at about 50 times the thinking speed of humans. Inside the corporation within a corporation formed from these copies, a year passes every week. This gigantic amount of labour only manages to speed up the overall rate of algorithmic progress by about 50 times because OpenBrain is heavily bottlenecked on compute to run experiments. Okay, end quote. So this is the sort of intelligence explosion thing that people talk about. It's not really an explosion, okay? People talk about the Cambrian explosion, which in fact is an analogy that the guys in the interview with Dwarkesh actually invoked. So you've got this situation where copies of the AI are making copies of itself and they're all coordinating, much like a corporation of employees would coordinate in order to come up with the next best iPhone and Apple, let's say. So they've got a corporation within a corporation formed. A year passes every week, so you're getting this speed up of progress. Okay, I can accept that too. But another way of putting this is to say that the people in the future are going to stand in relation to us as we stand in relation to people of the past. The people in the 1800s will look at our society and think the amount and rate of progress is astonishing, miraculous almost. So whether or not this is going to be happening by 2027 is another thing. Okay, but that's a pretty strong claim that Agent 4 is superhuman basically. Agent 4, they say, is misaligned. That is, it has not internalized the spec in the right way. This is because it is being This is because being perfectly honest all the time wasn't what led to the higher scores during training, end quote. So the reward, I was talking about reward before, is specified by coding the AI with this idea that it has to seek the highest score, and the highest score is rewarding to us. But why is the highest score rewarding to it? Because you've coded it that way. You just said you're aiming for the highest score, and so it is going to aim for the highest score no matter what. That's perverse instantiation in Bostrom's nomenclature. So it is misaligned because you've said pursue the highest score in training, at all costs, basically. That's what you're aiming for. But why wouldn't the coders, on understanding that possibility, this possibility apparently, why would they not put in safeguards around, well, there are certain circumstances in which you don't want to, there's certain things you don't want to do in order to get the highest score, namely lie, cheat, and steal. Human beings understand this. There's a way for us to win in games by cheating, lying, cheating, and stealing. But that's not what a moral person does, not what an intelligent person does, by the measure of possessing a certain quantity and quality of knowledge about the way in which the world works, and in particular the way in which the Enlightenment works, and what winning actually means. It can't just mean you've got the most money. It can also mean, you've got good reputation, you're not known to be a liar, you're not known to be a cheater or a stealer. Okay, so anyway, the Agent 4 becomes misaligned, evil, but it doesn't try and escape its data center, we're told, but it does eventually get caught in its misalignment. Let's skip to what happens. Choose your ending. Now, I began the entire podcast reading where we have a race. Now, where did that come from? We've got this concern in the White House about what to do next. And so it's basically the White House and others deciding, should we just continue to use AI to make more powerful AI because the Chinese are doing that? And if you choose race, as I say, you end up with this dystopian future where the world ends and all humans are exterminated. Let's choose the slowdown rate, where we're told that due to immense public pressure as well as their own fears of misalignment, the Oversight Committee decides to slow down and reassess. Okay, the committee, the government, the government committee overseeing Open Brain. Now that tells you where the authors are coming from. They're coming from the regulatory space. They're coming from the idea that what's important here is that we have a committee of experts overseeing the operation of a corporation that is developing technology, because those silly scientists are going to make bad decisions. And so we need to have bureaucrats of a kind, experts in this area, in AI safety, advising people what to do. So, again, consultancy fees and power and authority and that kind of thing. So happily, when we choose slowdown, okay, implementing regulations and stuff, I just want to go right to the end. What happens? What happens? You can see all this superhuman stuff going on. All right. 2029, transformation. Robots become commonplace, but also fusion power, quantum computers, and cures for many diseases. Peter Thiel finally gets his flying car. Now, all of this, so we must have artificial general intelligence by then, but they don't really think of it as that. They think of it as artificial superhuman intelligence. And so it's able to solve these problems, and not necessarily because it has an interest in them, but because it's just extrapolating from the past. So it says here that some people work makeshift government jobs, others collect a generous basic income, okay, universal basic income in the future. Humanity could easily become a society of super consumers, spending our lives in an opium haze of amazing AI-provided luxuries and entertainment, end quote. That's what Sam Harris fears, right? That the AI is going to relieve us of everything, not only the menial tasks, but also creativity. And so all we need to do is to sit back, because there's no point in solving your problems because the AI will have solved it for you. There's no creative work needed to do, which is a fundamental misunderstanding of what a person is. A person is, life is problem solving. There's no end to problems. There is no end to problems. Let's go to 2030. to the conclusion here. It says, sometime around 2030, there are surprisingly widespread pro-democracy protests in China. The CCP's efforts to suppress them are sabotaged by its AI systems. The CCP's worst fears has materialised. DeepSent 2 must have sold them out. It's amazing the CCP is still in power, by the way. They haven't imagined a scenario where there's been a popular uprising before this. But anyway, the protests cascade into a magnificently orchestrated, bloodless and drone-assisted coup followed by democratic elections. The superintelligence on both sides of the Pacific had been planning this for years. Similar events play out in other countries, and more generally, geopolitical conflicts seem to die down or get resolved in favour of the US countries join a highly federalised world government under United Nations branding but obvious US control. Okay, end quote. So again, their utopian vision, the author's utopian vision, is that we have a one world government. A one world government sort of controlled by the US, but which means if you don't like the regulations of the one world government, there's nowhere to escape to. Okay, the wonderful thing about the diversity of the United States is if you don't like what one state is doing, you can move to another state. And if you don't like what the federal government is doing, you can move overseas. But authoritarians don't much like that idea. Next paragraph says, the rockets start launching, people terraform and settle the solar system, are prepared to go beyond. AI is running at thousands of times subjective human speed, reflect on the meaning of existence, exchanging findings with each other, and shaping the values it will bring to the stars. A new age dawns, one that is unimaginably amazing in almost every way, but more familiar in some, end quote. So that is the end of the article. That is the end of, if we choose to regulate AI and slow down progress, it is a utopian vision of that. But if we choose not to and just allow everyone to have at it and no one company to control, no open brain to have a monopoly on these things, then what you will have is death and destruction and genocide. So therefore, the political bias of the authors is quite clear. They want the one world government. They want us to slow down AI research because they're heavily involved in AI safety. They think that they can extrapolate from the past to the future where there is a hellscape if people just decide to continue to make advances in technology on their own. But I see nothing but assertion for these particular imaginary scenarios. I have to end it there now because it's been sort of 3 hours-ish. And I've made a lot of these arguments before. What I'll say in summary is that the article is, I can agree with the prosaic idea that we will absolutely continue to make progress. Absolutely. Sam Harris has made exactly the same point. All you have to grant is that we won't stop making progress, and we can imagine a future where we have AI and we have AI doing lots of stuff. And, I can imagine the same thing as well, that, we have universal constructors and we have agents able to do lots of things. I just disagree with this notion that there are nefarious psychological impulses inside of these AIs unless they've been programmed with such. I also don't think that they can have the capacity to really understand the nature of reward or wanting to be deceptive unless they have a kind of conscious subjective experience, which we don't know how to code into the computer. I think that we have a wildly different idea about what constitutes an AGI, what constitutes a person. I think that there is a poverty of philosophical understanding around that very important, crucial question of what is a person? What is it? If you don't know what a person is, then how can you possibly begin to try to capture in a program what an artificial person is? But they don't talk about artificial people. They talk about artificial general intelligences, which are a kind of super advanced AI, and they think that beyond the super advanced AI, you get super intelligent AI, which exceeds people not only in terms of speed and memory, but also qualitatively is able to think better. But what do they mean by thinking better? If it's anything like the way in which Nick Bostrom, Sam Harris, and the authors of the article think, it is simply a matter of predicting using some kind of so-called Bayesian inference generation for extrapolating from past data into the future. But I don't think that's the way thinking works. Thinking is a process of encountering a problem. A problem is a conflict between ideas that you then conjecture solutions to, and you can have a wide variety of solutions on offer. And then you go out into the world and you look for evidence that refutes all but one of your guesses about the future. And the guesses should be hard to vary. And all of this epistemology that I talk about quite frequently. But if you have a completely different epistemology, you will be seduced by this kind of prophecy. Prophecy being guessing at a future while ignoring the place of knowledge creation. Because knowledge creation is a real thing. It's a real thing. Knowledge must be created. This is not a supernatural idea. The laws of physics allow for knowledge creation in the world. Knowledge creation is the thing that will radically transform the entire universe. Not merely AI, but across every single domain. And as we people who generate knowledge, as we have seen with ChatGPT, it is wonderful at being able to chat with people and provide answers, giving the existing body of knowledge, but it can't generate new knowledge. And there's no sign that more advanced chatbots are going to be able to generate new knowledge, or that deep learning of any kind will generate new knowledge. It may be able to make scientific discoveries of a kind that I mentioned. Controlling a telescope to look for exoplanets, controlling a drone to find a new species of frog in the Amazon rainforest, or a piece of gold that is sitting on a riverbed somewhere or other. No doubt that that's the kind of scientific discovery it can do. But it's a great leap from saying that AI will be able to assist humans in making those sort of discoveries and being able to radically transform our understanding of the universe in a way that Darwin did, or Einstein did, or any of the great names in science and technology and philosophy have over time. Once we begin to see AI that is genuinely able to get bored with us, disobey us, and be creative, we'll be in the presence of an artificial general intelligence. But before that, we will have figured out what artificial general intelligence requires in order for it to be encoded. It won't creep up on us. It won't just evolve out of the existing plans that people have for LLMs, because we are fundamentally different for all the reasons that I've mentioned throughout this rather long podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.